A chilling silence has fallen over the once mighty Anoaʻi wrestling dynasty. A family that has dominated sports entertainment for decades, with bloodlines that span from Yokozuna to The Rock, now finds itself shrouded in mourning, disbelief, and fear. The headlines broke like thunder across the wrestling world. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, is fighting for his life after a sudden, tragic health crisis. And today, for the first time, the family speaks. But what they reveal is not just a plea for prayers. It is a heartbreaking reckoning. One that threatens to change everything fans thought they knew about the man behind the empire. And behind the curtain, the truth is far more painful than anyone expected. It began in whispers. Social media rumblings. Missed appearances. Sudden silence from WWE officials. Fans thought it was storyline, some new twist in the ever-escalating Bloodline saga. But it wasn't. This time, Roman Reigns wasn't hiding. He was collapsing. Not in the ring, but in real life. And the silence wasn't part of the show. It was because nobody knew what to say. WWE refused to comment. No tweets. No promos. Just eerie, deafening quiet. But behind the scenes, panic was erupting. A source close to the Anoaʻi family confirmed that Roman was rushed to a private medical facility just outside Pensacola, Florida, after suffering what was initially described as a severe fatigue-related episode. But it was worse. Much worse. The man who once carried the company on his shoulders, the indomitable, unbeatable tribal chief, was now battling an aggressive form of a rare autoimmune disease, and the prognosis was bleak. As news broke, the wrestling world paused. The locker room went silent. Wrestlers who once warred against Roman in the ring now exchanged tearful phone calls behind closed doors. Paul Heyman was unreachable. Solo Sikoa vanished from social media. And the Usos, normally known for their brash swagger, were seen arriving at a Miami hospital, eyes bloodshot, expressions grim. But it wasn't until Rikishi, the proud patriarch of the family and a WWE Hall of Famer, stepped forward that the emotional dam truly broke. Appearing in a quiet, dimly lit interview room with his head bowed and tears streaming down his face, Rikishi whispered just 5 words that broke millions of hearts: "My nephew is not okay." His voice cracked. He tried to gather himself, but the weight of decades of family pride, warrior tradition, and unspeakable grief crashed down around him. "Roman is fighting a battle none of us saw coming," Rikishi said, looking directly into the camera. "And I don't know if he's going to make it." Those words sent shockwaves through the industry. Not a promo. Not a work. This wasn't entertainment. This was real. In the hours that followed, more pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. Confidential medical sources revealed that Roman had been battling undiagnosed symptoms for months: fatigue, dizziness, even occasional blackouts. But he pushed through. Like always. Like the soldier he is. After all, this was Roman Reigns. The man who returned from leukemia. The man who conquered Brock Lesnar. The man who built the bloodline. But perhaps it was precisely that relentless pressure, the demand to always be strong, to always perform, that became his downfall. "Roman always kept things to himself," said a family friend, voice trembling. "He didn't want to seem weak. Not to the fans. Not to the boys in the back. And definitely not to the elders. He wanted to carry the family name with pride. But none of us saw how much he was hurting." According to sources inside WWE, Roman's condition had been deteriorating for weeks before his sudden collapse. He had quietly missed several meetings, canceled training sessions, and requested changes to his travel schedule. Insiders say he confided in only a handful of people, including Paul Heyman and Solo Sikoa, but even they were not prepared for how bad things had gotten. He said he was just tired. Said he needed rest, one WWE executive shared. "We had no idea his body was shutting down." Back in Florida, the Anoaʻi family gathered. One by one, uncles, cousins, siblings, all generations of this wrestling dynasty, came together in Roman's home. But it wasn't a reunion. It was a vigil. We held hands around his bed, said Sefa Fatu, Rikishi's youngest son. We prayed. We cried. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Doctors confirmed that Roman was suffering from an aggressive autoimmune disorder that was attacking his internal organs at a rapid pace. The official diagnosis remains undisclosed out of respect for the family's privacy, but experts close to the situation describe it as life-threatening, progressive, and irreversible without immediate and aggressive treatment. As this heartbreaking news spread, fans began flooding WWE social media accounts demanding answers. But the company remained silent, perhaps out of respect, or perhaps because it didn't know what to say. WWE superstars, however, were less restrained. Seth Rollins tweeted a broken heart emoji. Cody Rhodes posted a prayer hands photo. Even The Rock, Roman's distant cousin, broke his usual media silence to post, "Family is everything. Pray for Yus." Behind the scenes, the emotional impact on the Anoaʻi family has been devastating. Jimmy Uso reportedly broke down in tears during a closed-door family meeting. Jey Uso has not returned calls for over 72 hours. And Solo Sikoa, Roman's newest Bloodline enforcer, has been spotted entering and exiting the hospital with his hoodie pulled low, avoiding cameras. But perhaps the most gut-wrenching moment came when Afa and Sika, the wild Samoans and Roman's legendary uncles, arrived at the hospital. These are men who trained Roman with their bare hands. Who taught him to fight, to endure, to protect the name. And now, they stood at his bedside. Helpless Sika, Roman's father, barely recognized his son. "He's so small," he whispered. "He looks nothing like the warrior I raised." But the heartbreak didn't stop with the family. Fans began holding vigils outside WWE arenas. Posters reading, "Stay Strong Tribal Chief" appeared at Raw and SmackDown. Thousands of handwritten letters began arriving at the WWE Performance Center in Orlando. A movement was growing, not just to honor Roman the performer, but Roman the Man in Samoa, where the Anoaʻi roots run deepest. An entire village held a traditional ceremony, lighting torches and chanting prayers. Elders wept openly. Children wore head-of-the-table shirts as they marched silently through the streets. "Roman was more than just a wrestler," one Samoan leader said. "He was our son. Our pride. Our blood. And now, we may lose him." As the hours passed, the news worsened. Roman's condition had not stabilized. Emergency dialysis was considered. Then experimental treatment. Still, no guarantees. Meanwhile, Rikishi remained by his side, never leaving the room. "I've seen pain before," Rikishi said in a heartbreaking statement. "But I've never felt anything like this. This is like watching the foundation of our family crumble." For decades, the Anoaʻi family has been the backbone of wrestling royalty. They gave the world giants and legends. They gave fans magic. But in Roman, they found something else. A symbol. A unifier. A warrior who took the old ways and made them global. A man who carried not just belts, but burdens. Now, that warrior lies silent. Hooked to machines. His fate uncertain. And the Anoaʻi family, once a fortress of strength, is now a house of grief outside the hospital. Paparazzi circle like vultures. But inside, no photos are taken. No press is allowed. Only prayers. Hushed voices. And memories. "We used to call him Joe," Rikishi said through tears. "Before the world knew him as Roman. Before the belts. The pyro. The suits. He was just Joe. My sister's son. The little boy who used to run around barefoot, pretending he was The Rock. And now, I just want him back." And for the first time, the family is no longer talking about comebacks or returns. They're not talking about SummerSlam or WrestleMania. They're talking about saying goodbye. A memorial service is quietly being discussed, not because Roman has passed, but because the family knows the road ahead is dark, and hope is fading. "If this is the end," one cousin said, "we want to send him off with dignity." But still, the question echoes, how did this happen? Some point to stress. To the years of carrying WWE on his back. To the weight of leadership. Others whisper of backstage betrayals, of emotional trauma, of things Roman never said out loud. Paul Heyman, his closest advisor, has not issued a single statement. His silence speaks volumes. There are rumors, of course. Conspiracies. Was this preventable? Did WWE push him too hard? Did the Bloodline storyline mask real tension within the family? No one knows for sure, but what is known is this: the Anoaʻi family is fractured. The head of the table has been removed. And for the first time in decades, there's no one sitting in the chair, not Jimmy. Not Jay. Not Solo, just an empty seat, and in that silence, grief grows. Behind the scenes at WWE headquarters, the atmosphere is no less somber. Executives walk the halls in silence. Promotional posters of Roman Reigns lining the walls now seem like haunting reminders of a man whose legacy looms larger than life, and whose fate remains uncertain. Creative teams have reportedly torn up entire scripts and long-term plans. We had WrestleMania main events with Roman for the next 2 years, one producer admitted. Now, we're not even sure he'll speak again. In a business where the line between fiction and reality is constantly blurred, this moment feels disturbingly real. The tribal chief, the cornerstone of the most successful wrestling storyline in a generation, is suddenly not just out of action, but fighting to stay alive. And as the world watches with bated breath, the Anoaʻi family is forced to confront a devastating truth: they may have to say goodbye to their brightest star. Whispers continue to emerge about what might have been missed. One longtime WWE medical consultant privately stated, Roman's condition didn't start overnight. These types of autoimmune illnesses often simmer for years, masked by fatigue, mental stress, and the kind of punishment wrestlers endure every single day. His schedule was brutal. The travel, the training, the constant pressure. It's a miracle he lasted this long. Within the family, the guilt is crushing. Some blame themselves for not pushing him to slow down. Others blame WWE for not intervening. But Rikishi, in his most vulnerable public statement yet, placed the blame squarely on something deeper: silence. In our culture, we teach men to be strong, Rikishi said in a Raw interview. To be warriors. But we don't always teach them to speak. To say, I'm not okay. Roman carried this family, this business, this legacy, for years. But he never said a word about the weight it put on him. And now we may never hear his voice again. Those words have lit a firestorm across wrestling forums and social media. The hashtag #PrayForRoman hashtag has reached over 300 million impressions in under 24 hours. Messages from fans, young and old, from every corner of the globe, continue to flood the internet. Some share stories of how Roman inspired them to fight through cancer, depression, or loss. Others simply write, "Thank you, Tribal Chief. Come back home." In Samoa, sacred chants continue around family shrines. Rituals are being performed. The family matriarchs have gathered, lighting ceremonial torches to invoke protection and healing. Even members of other Samoan wrestling families, including the Mavaias and extended relatives of Peter Maivia, have come forward, expressing solidarity and offering ancient prayers. For them, this isn't about fame. It's about blood. About ancestors. About a man whose life has transcended generations and cultures. Back at the hospital, Roman's condition remains critical. Doctors have stabilized his vitals, but the autoimmune flare-up has caused serious damage to his kidneys and lungs. Emergency transplant options are being explored. Specialists from around the world have been flown in at Meghan Markle's recommendation, who quietly reached out through private contacts to help. It's a gesture that stunned the family, but reminded everyone that in moments of tragedy, humanity can eclipse rivalry. Meanwhile, the younger members of the family, Zilla Fatu, Jacob Fatu, and Sefa, are grappling with something they never imagined: life without Roman. He was our general, Jacob admitted in a somber live stream. We all looked to him. Even when we didn't say it. We were the bloodline because of him. Without him, we're just men trying to hold on to something that's breaking. In a particularly gut-wrenching moment, Cepha was seen pacing outside the hospital chapel, clutching a folded piece of paper, an unfinished promo Roman had been working on just days before his collapse. Written in black ink were the words, "Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family." The irony was unbearable elsewhere. Paul Heyman has reportedly entered seclusion. No social media posts. No interviews. No public appearances. A WWE representative confirmed Heyman had requested indefinite leave to deal with personal matters. Insiders claim he's been by Roman's side daily, refusing to leave the hospital floor, speaking quietly to his longtime client even while he remained unresponsive. He talks to Roman like he's cutting a promo, a nurse revealed. It's heartbreaking. He tells him he still owes him a WrestleMania finish. He tells him to get up. And yet, despite all the emotion, the truth remains grim. Doctors say Roman's recovery, if it comes, will be long and uncertain. Even if he survives, the chances of returning to the ring are slim. The Warrior who once spearheaded the Shield, carried the WWE title across continents, and stood atop the wrestling world may have already had his final match, but perhaps the most profound pain comes from his children. Roman's twin boys and daughter have been shielded from the worst details, but insiders say they've begun to understand. They keep asking where Daddy is, one family friend shared. And all we can say is that he's resting. But the truth is, we don't know if they'll see him wake up. The Anoaʻi compound in Pensacola, usually filled with laughter, cookouts, and music, now sits in near-total silence. Family photos of Roman smiling, holding championship belts, playing with his kids, are now covered with candles and white flowers. It's a vigil. Not yet a memorial. But dangerously close outside WWE, rival promotions have expressed their support. AEW posted a black and white image of Roman with the caption, "Wrestling is family. Praying for the big dog." NJPW, TNA, and independent wrestlers across the globe echoed the sentiment, but one man has remained notably silent. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, arguably the most powerful figure in the extended Anoaʻi family, has yet to issue a statement. Sources close to him say he's devastated, but doesn't want to draw attention away from Roman's fight by making it about himself. Still, insiders confirm he has been in constant contact with Rikishi and Sika, offering private resources and standing by for whatever the family needs. Back in WWE, things are beginning to shift. There's talk of canceling or dramatically altering upcoming pay-per-views. The creative team is rewriting entire arcs. But one thing is certain, the Bloodline storyline is on hold indefinitely. No one, not even Vince McMahon or Triple H, can see a way forward right now, and maybe that's the point, because Roman Reigns wasn't just the face of WWE. He was the soul of a legacy. A warrior descended from generations of gladiators. A man who chose to fight through pain, hide his wounds, and carry others even when he himself was falling apart. And now, that man is lying silent. A ventilator humming beside him. And the family who once crowned him tribal chief now surrounds his bed in prayer, hoping for a miracle. As Rikishi said, "I don't care about belts, fame, or ratings. I just want my nephew to open his eyes. To tell us he's okay. That's all that matters now." The Anoaʻi family has faced loss before. They've buried champions. They've stood in fire and risen. But this is different. This is Roman. The cornerstone. The future. And now, perhaps, the goodbye. In the early morning hours, just as the sun began to rise over the quiet streets of Pensacola, a black SUV slowly pulled up to the hospital. Out stepped Alpha Anoaʻi Jr., known to wrestling fans as Manu, his face pale, eyes heavy with emotion. He said nothing to the gathered reporters. Just kept walking. Behind him, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a bottle of water, came Naomi, Jimmy Uso's wife. She too stayed silent, head bowed. Inside that hospital, behind those sterile walls and beeping machines, the heart of their family lay still, caught between life and whatever comes after. The air in Roman's room was heavy, thick with grief and the unspoken dread that everyone was too afraid to put into words. He had always been a force, a pillar, physically larger than life, emotionally guarded but deeply respected. Even those who opposed him in the ring often admired his presence. But now, all of that had been stripped away. Gone were the sharp suits, the championship belts, the cocky glares. What remained was a gaunt, pale shell of the tribal chief. The ventilator did most of the work now. And every beep of the monitor was another second bought. Another second the family refused to take for granted. The room had become a sanctuary, not just for the family, but for the memory of the man who once commanded arenas with nothing more than a glance. At the foot of the bed sat a framed photo, Roman at WrestleMania 38, holding both titles in the air, drenched in sweat and glory. On the wall hung a faded "Acknowledge Me" t-shirt, now eerily silent in its meaning. And resting gently on the bedside table, untouched for days, was a small note Roman had written to his daughter, simply signed, "Love, Daddy." Back at the Anoaʻi residence, the elders had gathered. The family matriarch, Roman's grandmother, who rarely speaks at public occasions, led a private prayer in Samoan. Her voice was soft, trembling. Every word uttered felt like a goodbye draped in ancestral memory. The room was full of pain, but there was no yelling, no outrage, just the kind of stillness that comes when you realize your greatest warrior may never return home. One cousin quietly took down Roman's framed tribal chief proclamation, a decorative family heirloom given to him in 2021, when the family had officially named him as their generational leader. No one said why they removed it. No one had to. Meanwhile, the media frenzy outside the hospital reached a fever pitch. Drone cameras hovered above. Tabloid reporters camped out in their cars. But they didn't see the real story. They didn't see Jey Uso breaking down in a hospital hallway, falling to his knees as he whispered, "I wasn't ready for this." They didn't see Solo Sikoa refusing to leave Roman's bedside, even when doctors told him he needed rest. "I'll rest when he gets up," Solo snapped. And perhaps most heart-wrenching of all was the moment Roman's children were brought to visit. WWE had sent security, made private arrangements to shield them from the press. Meghan Markle had once again stepped in quietly, helping the family coordinate with pediatric grief counselors. It was Naomi who carried Roman's daughter in her arms. The girl clung to a stuffed dog, one Roman had given her after a show in Atlanta. She asked where her daddy was. Naomi couldn't answer. The child reached out and touched his hand. "He's cold," she said. The room went silent. That moment, more than any, shattered those present. Not even Rikishi could hold back the flood of emotion as he watched the next generation of the Anoaʻi family silently mourn a father who couldn't answer them anymore. It was no longer just a health battle. It was a countdown. A reckoning. And the family knew it. The situation reached such a level of emotional gravity that Triple H himself flew in, quietly, unannounced. He didn't wear a suit. No entourage. Just a black hoodie, jeans, and a face etched with concern. Sources say he met privately with Sika and Rikishi, expressing both grief and responsibility. "We pushed him too hard," Triple H reportedly said, his voice breaking. "We should have seen the signs. We didn't protect him." Back at WWE headquarters, a crisis team was formed. Press kits were being prepared. Social media strategies drafted. And yet, no one wanted to publish them. No one was ready to accept the possibility that WWE's golden child was slipping away for good. Meanwhile, in the WWE locker rooms, the morale had plummeted. The younger talents who grew up idolizing Roman, like Austin Theory, Carmelo Hayes, and Braun Breaker, struggled to focus. Practices were cancelled. Rehearsals skipped. Some talent refused to perform. One anonymous superstar reportedly said backstage at SmackDown, "I can't go out there and pretend like this is just another show. Roman's not just the champ. He's the reason most of us are here." Even Kevin Owens, Roman's longtime on-screen rival, was said to have broken down backstage. "I hated him in the storylines," he said quietly. "But I loved the man behind the Shield." As the days passed and the world waited, more revelations emerged. Private journal entries from Roman, shared with permission by the family, began to surface. In one, dated just weeks before his collapse, Roman wrote, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm still Joe. Or if all that's left is Roman Reigns. I can't breathe in public. I can't rest at home. I smile on stage, but I'm not okay. I haven't been okay in a long time. But I have to keep going. For my family. For the legacy. For the bloodline." The letter shook fans to their core. The strongest man in the company. The invincible tribal chief. And yet behind closed doors, he was suffocating. Fans held candlelight vigils outside WWE events. They chanted his name. They wore armbands with "US" written in gold letters. At Madison Square Garden, a massive projection lit up the arena facade. "We acknowledge you. Forever." But back in the hospital, time was running thin. Doctors had begun discussing long-term coma care options. Roman's lungs had worsened. Infection risk was high. The family was called in for a final consultation. No cameras. No social media. Just family. And tears. At the center of the discussion, silent but unmovable, was Sika. He had barely spoken in days. But now, with everyone looking to him, he finally raised his voice. "I gave my son to the world. And the world broke him. The room broke with it." And then, as if fate couldn't be any crueler, another blow landed. The family was told Roman's kidneys were failing. Dialysis would buy time. But not hope. Not recovery. That night, in the hospital chapel, a family meeting took place. No scripts. No characters. Just fathers, mothers, siblings, and cousins. They held hands and prayed. Some wept. Some stayed silent. And some, like Rikishi, stood in the corner staring at nothing, lost in memories of a boy who once dreamed of flying higher than any Anoaʻi before him. When they left the chapel, the decision had been made. If Roman didn't improve within 48 hours, they would begin end-of-life care. That news did not stay secret. Within hours, the world knew Roman Reigns may not survive the week. The headlines exploded. Fans flooded WWE's website, crashing servers. Dozens of news outlets ran breaking reports. Wrestlers from every promotion in the world issued statements, and finally, after days of silence, The Rock spoke. On his Instagram, Dwayne Johnson posted a black and white photo of him and Roman from years ago, both in training gear, sweaty and smiling. The caption read, "My little cousin. My brother in this life. You carried the torch with honor. If this is your last battle, know this, you've already won. We love you. Always." That single post garnered over 100 million views in 6 hours, and then, the video came. Rikishi, broken but resolute, posted a video message on behalf of the entire Anoaʻi family. There were no lights. No production. Just a man sitting in silence, eyes puffy, voice shaking. He stared into the camera and whispered, "My nephew is slipping away. And I can't stop it. The world knows him as Roman Reigns. We know him as Joe. Joe Anoaʻi. A son. A father. A husband. A warrior. Please, pray for him. Not because he's a star. But because he's human. Because he's ours." The screen faded to black and the world fell silent. In the hours after Rikishi's video, something shifted. Not just in the wrestling community, but across the world. It wasn't just fans or fellow superstars mourning anymore. Roman's fight had become a global moment of reckoning, cutting through cultural lines, sports rivalries, and entertainment boundaries. This wasn't a storyline. It was raw, human, and terrifying. A family's foundation was crumbling. And at its center was a man whose heart once carried the weight of a dynasty, now barely strong enough to beat. In Samoa, the high chief of Roman's village led a sacred ceremony rarely seen in modern times. A sea of villagers clad in traditional lava stood shoulder to shoulder under the night sky. They sang in unison, soft chants of healing and protection. A bonfire lit the center of the gathering as elders recited Roman's lineage, invoking ancestral spirits to guard him. Women placed leis around his photograph, while the young boys, many of whom had posters of Roman Reigns on their bedroom walls, cried openly. "He's more than a wrestler to us," the High Chief said. "He's our son who never forgot where he came from. And now we call on the heavens to remember him." Across oceans, in cities as far-flung as Toronto, Johannesburg, Tokyo, and Melbourne, fans organized candlelight marches. Murals began appearing overnight. One in Mexico City depicted Roman with wings, half gladiator, half angel. In Chicago, a group of leukemia survivors gathered in front of the Allstate Arena with signs that read, "He gave us strength. Now it's our turn." And yet, inside that cold hospital room, time continued to run mercilessly forward. Roman's condition remained unchanged, his body still locked in a fragile state between survival and surrender. Doctors administered emergency dialysis and experimental immunotherapy, but with each passing hour, they feared complications would overtake him. Fluid had begun to build around his lungs again. His temperature fluctuated wildly. A quiet code blue had been called at 3:17 a.m. Only narrowly stabilized by a team of specialists on call. Sika stood by his son's bedside through it all. He had barely eaten. Barely slept. Just sat, fingers wrapped around Roman's hand, whispering stories from their youth, as if the sound of old memories could somehow wake him. "Remember when you swam across the bay, son?" he murmured one morning. "You were so strong. Stronger than the ocean. You're still that boy. Come back to us, Joe. Come back." Solo Sikoa, stoic and silent, placed his bloodline ring gently on the hospital table beside Roman's fore. "He made me more than a wrestler," Solo later said. "He made me a man. A leader. A brother. If he doesn't